Okay.
Item A is approval of the agenda. Supervisor Kirsten.
Approve.
Treasurer Elliott. Aye. Sorry, we needed a motion, didn't we?
Okay.
You had it.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Support.
Trustee Joseph and Clerk Berry.
Trustee Joseph. Aye. Clerk Berry, aye. Supervisor Kirsten.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott. Aye. Trustee Anderson. Aye. Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Planning Commission, I will make a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Miller, supported by Mr. LaBelle. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you, sir. Item 6 is presentations. We'll begin our presentation tonight from our esteemed colleague, Jill Bahm from Giffels, Webster. Jill?
I'm over here. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Hello, Jill Bahm, partner in charge of the planning team at Giffels Webster. And thank you so much for having us. I'm here with Stephanie Osborne, one of our planners as well. I was going to give you a short presentation and overview on cannabis and cannabis regulation in Michigan, but with talking with the clerk, we had a lot of the similar information. So we thought we really probably only need one good presentation rather than two to save time. But I wanted to sort of preface our conversation tonight that we appreciate both of these boards getting together, Township Board and the Planning Commission. As you all know, the Planning Commission has the responsibility for drafting zoning ordinance regulation for the township, and the Planning Commission is a recommending body. And so the Township Board then will take final action on any ordinances and then have that action be the adoption of the ordinance language. The reason we wanted to have this joint meeting together with you all tonight is for the Township Board to help guide the Planning Commission, not to tell them what to do necessarily, but to provide some of the framework that the Township Board is interested in seeing. That being, what are the goals we're trying to accomplish? So this is what we hope to hear tonight from the Township Board and the Planning Commission as well. What are the goals that we are trying to accomplish as a community through allowing marijuana facilities in the township? And then number two, what are we concerned about? Are we concerned about noise, traffic, odor? Those are all things that we don't need to solve those tonight, but we just need to articulate what it is that we're concerned about and then turn it over to the Planning Commission and have them do their good work that they do. And then it'll come back to the Township Board again. So that, I think, is in a nutshell what I wanted to say, and then I'll turn it over to the clerk for her presentation. Did you want to add anything, Mr. Siebert? No.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
Item B then will be the presentation from Clerk Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Before we get started, I just want to let everyone know, especially our Planning Commission members, that I understand if for those who are seeing this and have never looked at this issue before, I understand. I used to be there myself. It was 4 years ago, before 2018, when this was passed in Michigan. I knew nothing about cannabis myself. I like to joke and say I never even tried it, and I went to Michigan State. So some of us get it. I knew nothing about the product or the process or anything like that. There's a lot of information that you're going to hear, and it took our Cannabis Committee over 2 years to really fully understand a lot of the elements and aspects involved in this issue. It is quite complex. However, over the course of the last 4 years, I have had the privilege of visiting many establishments and talking with people in a lot of different parts of the industry. I was also chosen by the governor as well as the state of Michigan to participate in the first municipal roundtable with regards to recreational cannabis and implementation at the municipal level. And then I was also part of a panel discussion by the Michigan Townships Association's legal counsel, who asked me to participate at their conference with regards to a breakout session on this issue as well. So it's been quite a process to learn all of this, so I just would want to encourage everyone that if you don't understand everything tonight, don't feel badly about that, because it does take a lot of time and it is quite complex. So we'll try to simplify best we can. So the purpose of this report tonight is to determine where and how Chesterfield Township should proceed with the commercial sales, provisioning, or consumption outlets, transport, testing, commercial growth, and cannabis consumption facilities within its boundaries. This report, jointly to the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees, is following an investigative period comprised of data collection and interviews with stakeholders, policymakers, law enforcement, legislative, and administrative personnel. This is a brief timeline history that was also in the report that was made by the Cannabis Committee to the full board last year. And this shows the timeline of the legalization of marijuana by state. And then, of course, in 2018, it was recreational marijuana was approved by the people of the state of Michigan. This is Proposal 1 as passed in the state of Michigan and the results that came from that election. This is legal possession and commercial sales, and we can see that it passed in the state of Michigan by nearly 56%. These are the results in Chesterfield Township specifically for Proposal 18-1. It was passed by 58% of our electorate in 2018. Now, that was not for the township specifically, that was obviously for the state of Michigan, but these were the Chesterfield Township results. So the Chesterfield Cannabis Committee timeline is something else I'd like to present to give you an idea of where we started and kind of where we are now. And as I go through this, I'd like to ask David Joseph. Trustee Joseph was my co-chair on that committee, and he may have some very valuable points to make as we go through this as well in terms of his experience on the committee and what he learned as we went through the process. The Chesterfield Cannabis Committee was established in 2018 by resolution of the Township Board. That was Resolution 2020-36, and it was adopted by the Chesterfield Township Board of Trustees on December 22nd, 2020. The purpose of the committee, as stated in the resolution, is to provide information, advice, and recommendations to the Township Board regarding the complex issues relating to marijuana and the Act. The committee consisted of 5 voting members, and that is the Chesterfield Planning Administrator, Jonathan Palin, the Board Liaison to the Planning Commission at that, which was Trustee Joseph and then later Trustee DeMink, the Board Liaison to the Zoning Board of Appeals, which was Trustee Anderson, 1 full-time board member of the Township Board, that was myself, and a representative from the Chesterfield Township Public Safety Department, which was oftentimes at that time Public Safety Director Kirsten, now Supervisor Kirsten, or his designee. Over the next 2 years, the committee held meetings and listened to presentations by the state of Michigan, local and state law enforcement, industry advocates, citizen organizations, concerned individuals, nonprofit organizations, and township consultants for legal and planning services, among others. Then in August of 2022, the Cannabis Committee presented its findings as well as recommended regulatory and zoning ordinances to the Chesterfield Township Board of Trustees. Trustee Joseph, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Just briefly, I know this presentation is pretty comprehensive, but I thought one of the things that I was most proud of on the Cannabis Committee was not only the experts that came to the committee and presented internal fire, police. We also had DPW. We had our presentation on what possible cannabis could mean to sound, smells, traffic, crime. All of these things were something that we got from the experts that came and presented to the committee. But what I think was critical was the real work that was done between committee meetings, and that was many of the committee members were out visiting sites. I went to Ann Arbor, Weberville, Warren, Clerk, just there was a traveling component to this because we wanted to see in other communities how they had handled all of the things that impact the environment, the community, I should say, and we brought those findings back. We shared those among one another, and we shared how that could be uniquely handled in Chesterfield. So there was a lot of work during the committee and a lot of sort of homework that went into, and I thought it was significant that you pointed out we didn't volunteer to co-chair the Cannabis Committee because of our deep fondness for cannabis. We didn't, finish the meetings by going to Trustee Anderson's house and enjoying, large amounts of cannabis. All of us came from different backgrounds. Mr. Anderson obviously is very involved with, he retires from Detroit Police. He's a principal at our Anchor Bay High School. Clerk Barry is very knowledgeable in this area. I myself was handling our juvenile drug court in Macomb County. I've worked personally with drugs and alcohol and the negative effects of chemical dependency. So I came at it with what I thought was an open mind. In truth, when I began, I was every bit the absolutely not in Chesterfield that Trustee DeMink was. So it was a learning experience for me, and as I continue to kind of collaborate and investigate, and you could see where this could be a reality for Chesterfield. And I think midway through our Cannabis Committee meetings, we began to have that kind of realization that it wasn't if cannabis would be in our community, it was just a matter of when. And so trying to prepare to best handle our reality seemed to be the task of our committee, and you'll see that in the presentation.
Thank you. And from my perspective, the reason why I became involved in wanting to understand this issue was obviously in 2018 when this passed for the state of Michigan. I knew that at some point we were going to need to make decisions, and I was going to need to make an informed decision about this issue for my own community, and I wanted to make sure that I was fully educated on the issue. And I knew that I wasn't sure whether I would be in favor of it or against it, but I knew that I would be making an informed decision, and that was what was important. And it also became evident to me very early on that I, particularly in my position as our clerk, needed to know this, is because most, in all cases that I'm aware of, it is the clerk's office that is responsible for issuing licenses and for procuring the protocols and processes for actually administering a marijuana licensing process. So my fellow clerks were already, who had in other communities, were already talking about this issue, and so I knew I needed to be well versed in it in order to serve best in my capacity as your clerk. So in 2022, there was a proposal to approve an ordinance establishing the number of marijuana establishments in Chesterfield Township. This is the actual language that appeared on the ballot. Shall the voters of the Township of Chesterfield approve an ordinance to provide for the number of marijuana establishments allowed within the municipality? This measure passed with 56.5% support by the voters. This is more language that is directly from the proposal language that was distributed when collecting signatures and was presented to our office. Authorization of marijuana establishment licenses, licensing administrative fees. You can see here that it says pursuant to Section 6 of the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act, the following adult use business licenses may be authorized to operate in the Township of Chesterfield by the holder of a state operating license subject to compliance with the Act as may be amended, and so on and so forth. The reason I included this slide is to show you that these were the license types and number that were specifically listed in that proposal language. So let's take a look at each one of those licenses and what are those licenses? What do they mean for Chesterfield as we make our decisions? A marijuana retailer license is a license that is issued to applicants engaged in selling marijuana and marijuana products to consumers in the state. Licensees can purchase marijuana from cultivators or processors. Marijuana recreational grower licenses. There are 3 types of recreational grower licenses, classes A, B, and C, and you will see from the descriptions that these licenses are predominantly distinguished by the number of plants that are allowed to be grown in a particular facility. A marijuana processor license is a license that is issued to business owners engaged in the processing of cannabis. Licensees can transfer, sell, or purchase marijuana from other licensed businesses. To give you an idea of the practical matter of what a processor does, these are the individuals who will take the marijuana components and they will produce things like gummies, oils, and other sorts of consumables. Excess marijuana grower licenses is a license that's issued to business owners who own 5 recreational Class C licenses and at least 2 medical Class C licenses. The number of medical Class C licenses a licensee possesses determines the number of excess cannabis plants they can cultivate. Again, that is all regulated and dictated by state law. A marijuana micro-business license is a license that is issued to applicants for the cultivation, processing, and sales of marijuana. Licensees can cultivate a maximum of 150 cannabis plants, but cannot purchase mature plants or processed marijuana products to augment their products. So very much like we have microbreweries, this is a micro-business, very, very similar for cannabis. The product is grown, processed, and cultivated and processed, as well as sold in the similar way that a microbrewery would be. Designated consumption establishment licenses. These licenses are actually quite rare. There are only 2 communities in the state of Michigan who actually allow for consumption establishment licenses. Chesterfield Township has now become the 3rd one based on the approval from our voters. This license is issued to business owners to allow for the consumption of marijuana within their premises. Licensees are prohibited from distributing or selling marijuana or marijuana products within the premises. So it is simply an area that marijuana products are consumed, but they are not sold or processed in any way. Marijuana event organizer and temporary event licenses. These are both event-related licenses. The license for an event organizer is issued to applicants to permit organizing marijuana events such as cannabis conferences and cannabis competition events. Marijuana can be sold and distributed during such events. They are, if you're familiar with the Cannabis Cup, that is multiple cannabis cups, those are the types of competitions where growers will come and compete with their products. You may also hear of something called a hash bash. That's also a colloquialism for a similar type of an event. That is more of a temporary event, and that is a license that is issued to a marijuana event organizer to permit the hosting of special events where marijuana will be consumed. This license is valid for a maximum of 1 week. Again, that is all dictated by the state agency. A marijuana secure transporter license is a license that is issued to business owners engaged in distributing and storing marijuana and marijuana products. Licensees can transport cannabis to and from all licensed marijuana businesses in the state. A marijuana safety compliance facility is a license that is issued to applicants to test the composition of medical and recreational marijuana in the state. Everyone who produces marijuana in the state of Michigan is required to put it through a rigorous testing and safety compliance protocol, and these are the facilities that complete that protocol. Those licensees must meet all the state's compliance standards at all times. So the Cannabis Regulatory Agency is the state agency that is in charge of licensing, doing all of the various background checks and so on and so forth. They are the agency that issues the license, and they set all of the rules, all the processes and the protocols for state licensure. It's a tremendous resource for those who are starting to learn about this process. I highly recommend going to their website. There are an awful lot of resources there available to you from the state of Michigan in terms of how a lot of the questions you may ask get answered at this website. And this is actually a screenshot of just some of the issues and topics that are covered on this website. The one that I find particularly helpful, that you may also find helpful as well, it's in a very easy question and answer format, and that is under other resources, the municipal guide. The municipal guide is helpful in terms of answering questions about medical marijuana versus recreational marijuana and the various state laws that are applicable for each of those types of marijuana products here in the state of Michigan. So this is the actual excerpt from the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act that I just pulled a couple of them that are applicable. Again, all of the links for all of the actual state laws are also available on that website through the state regulatory agency. But I found a couple of them that were particularly applicable to our business here and our scope. And that is that a municipality may adopt other ordinances that are not unreasonably impractical and do not conflict with this act or with any rule promulgated pursuant to this act, and that A, establish reasonable restrictions on public signs related to marijuana establishments, can also regulate the time, place, and manner of operation of marijuana establishments and of the production, manufacture, sale, or display of marijuana accessories. So whenever I know I move forward in elections saying that we are going to set certain rules and certain protocols, I always like to reference the state law that allows for us to do that. So this is the state law that allows for the municipality to do it, and also to let us know some of the things that we can regulate. And of course, our township legal counsel will be available to answer any other questions with regards to any legal implications. Another excerpt that I found that was applicable to our business here today is the section 9, subsect 3C, and that is that the property where the proposed marijuana establishment is to be located is not within an area zoned exclusively for residential use and is not within 1,000 feet of a pre-existing public or private school providing education in kindergarten or any grades 1 through 12, unless a municipality adopts an ordinance that reduces the distance requirement. So I just wanted our planning commission members to be aware. There's many, many, many other parts of the law, but this is one that I found we were asked about quite frequently, and there is a state statute that does address this issue. The Cannabis Committee, at coming to the end of our tenure, we had asked our planning consultants, Giffels Webster, to provide us with an idea of a visual map of what marijuana in Chesterfield might look like. And this is the first of 2 alternate maps that they provided to us with all of the zones identified and where we may see marijuana and where we would not see marijuana type establishments or facilities. This is the only difference between the 2 maps. One is a 1,000-foot buffer from sensitive areas, and the other one is a 500-foot buffer between from sensitive areas. So this was the alternate 1 and then alternate 2. So they don't change very much, but there are some key changes to take note of as you're looking at both of those maps. These were also the maps that were included to the township board in our report from the Cannabis Committee. I think it made it, certainly we're going to see the language and the ordinance language, but the maps gave an idea of a visual of where exactly they would be, and maybe where we would want them or wouldn't want them and where the buffer zones would be. So Giffels did a fantastic job of providing the Cannabis Committee with this resource, and then we went on to provide that to the township board as well. They also provided a breakdown of each individual zone. There was a map that just indicated commercial zones, just industrial, just agricultural, and so forth. These maps that I've shown you here, alternate 1 and alternate 2, have all zones included. Again, the only difference between those 2 sets of maps was the buffer zone. One was 500, one was 1,000 feet from sensitive areas, and we identified those sensitive areas as schools, churches, parks, senior living facilities, rehab facilities, and there are a couple of other distinctions as well. So lastly, some ordinance considerations as you are determining what the ordinances, as we are all determining what our ordinances are going to look like, both zoning and regulatory. There are some things that we learned on the Cannabis Committee that good ordinance crafting and discussions are based on. And here's just a couple of things to pass on that we found helpful. One is to consult other municipal ordinances in communities such as, for example, Ann Arbor and Lansing. They have long-standing ordinances regarding marijuana. Now, granted, they are both cities and we are townships, so there are some differences there. But as Trustee Joseph pointed out, actually going and visiting those places, consulting with some of their ordinance administrators and actually seeing what those places look like really helps when you're trying to equate that to what would that look like here in Chesterfield. So we highly recommend doing that. Also seek opportunities to visit existing facilities and consult with ordinance administrators. Find out how those ordinances are implemented. I've often said that I've seen many times over the years and learned that sometimes what sounds great on paper is not really practical when it comes to implementation. So speaking with ordinance administrators, they will let you know what works, what doesn't work from a practical perspective, and that may help as we craft our ordinances as well. The language needs to be clear, direct, and concise. Details should be as specific and clear as possible with no ambiguity. Processes need to be established and directed. Provisions should be consistent with other existing ordinances regarding similar type uses. And then an ordinance must not be unreasonably impractical. Carefully and thoroughly consider all elements, including the development, implementation, as well as immediate and long-term effects of the ordinance that we may craft together. I know that one of the things that, and Trustee Joseph, maybe you want to expand on some of these things, because I think these are things that, thing I can say is, as we were speaking with particularly industry advocates, I will tell you that I have found in my experience that the cannabis industry is very willing to do whatever it is we ask them to do. I have rarely found them to be problematic in that. Their biggest challenge in being compliant with what the municipalities want is the municipalities are just ill-equipped to provide them with the answers to questions that they have. So the best that we can answer those questions and the best that we can have clear directives inside of our ordinances and be as specific as we can be, they are more than willing to be compliant. It's just that the municipalities who have come before us have either not had the skill set or the knowledge and information to administer things properly, or they did not have the resources to properly manage and implement this type of an ordinance or legislation. So the best that we can get in being specific in what we are asking for, the better chance that we will have to have this be a smooth process.
I think you hit it right on the head there. The part about the cannabis retailers and entrepreneurs being more than willing, I have to say that is fleeting. That is definitely fleeting. The cannabis, I think entrepreneurs that I've heard from that are most active in the Chesterfield area also have other businesses in Chesterfield or other non-cannabis related interests in Chesterfield, but there was a lot of, these things become very political, and there was a lot of discussion about how we could craft this prior to a ballot initiative, and it didn't pan out. It was a deeply divided topic, and there was, I think, heartfelt belief that the voters would decide this, and that all of these meetings and all of these discussions would be they're irrelevant, and they couldn't have been more wrong. And now we are in a situation where the Planning Commission, and from our very first meeting, immediately after the ballot initiative passed in November, was the Planning Commission has not had, individual commission members may have been tracking this, and I know that you are all involved in the community, you see what's going on, but you had not been sort of in the formation of this. And so another thing that is good to know is our Giffels Webster planner consultant is well versed in this area, having tackled these things in other communities. And if you want to see how these things are done well, go to our planning consultant and ask to be sort of let in on what they've done in other communities, because there's some really phenomenal businesses that have come into the communities where Giffels works, and they're done right. And the other thing I would say to you, as you're trying to investigate, like from a safety standpoint or a tracking standpoint, most of the things that residents and maybe even some more ill-informed board members were worried about are actually monitored by the state. And they're monitored by the state in a way that I had never seen in any other business. And so if you look at things that maybe society considers a vice, so alcohol or tobacco, and you see all of the tight restrictions and parameters around alcohol and tobacco, I will tell you that it pales in comparison to the oversight that the cannabis business falls itself under. And one of the most eye-popping things that you see when you're in a facility is the utilization, the mandatory utilization, and I don't know if, Clerk Barry, if you included this in the list of links. But the metric system is a system that all cannabis retailers and cannabis entrepreneurs have to comply with. And it is a massive database that, if you hear, they will the common thing is that the metric system will track the cannabis operation from seed to sale. So as soon as the plant begins to grow, it has a barcode, and that plant is entered into the metric system. And at every point in its growth, from transplant to cultivation to its use, and it continues to be the barcode continues to be updated in the system all the way through the sale of the product. And it's done for a multitude of reasons. One, to track illegal operations and make sure that businesses are compliant with the required license parameters. It also goes to the safety of the consumer. So there were instances where there was some product that had come back from the lab testing, with some problems, and they were able to track every consumer who purchased that because the barcodes are tracked, as I say, from seed to sale. They document the chain of custody, they ensure the proper tax revenue accounting, and they handle all inspection, auditing, and reporting burdens. This is not a function of township government. This is a requirement by the Michigan Cannabis Regulatory, and the metric system is what is used. It's phenomenal, and there's really a very difficult, I don't know of any business that was able to cheat around metric, and it is worthwhile in noting that some of the concerns about the nefarious nature or increased crime and all of these things is just not an accurate. It's a myth. It truly is a myth. There are no, and I think most of that is because of the tight regulatory constraints put on the business. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. That completes our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Clerk Barron.
Was that matrix, not metrics?
So
It's M-A-X-T-R-I-X. Kathy just looked it up. Is that I think you said, I thought you said metric. Is it metric or matrix?
The metrics for scoring.
METRC.
Metric.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Clerk Berry and Trustee Joseph. We will move to item 7. Item 7A, the discussion of ordinances regarding marijuana establishments in Chesterfield Township. What I want to do here, if there's any objection, is to allow the board members for Chesterfield Township Board of Trustees to make comments and position statements or thoughts, and then turn it over to planning with Mr. Miller and offer that opportunity to them. Is that fair? So with that being said, as always, Trustee Anderson, I'll start with you.
Thank you. I think we're at a point now where... Thank you. I think with the recent election results, the residents have spoken, and we find ourselves here today. Thank you.
Trustee Joseph, add anything else?
Yeah, just the obviously I agree with Trustee Anderson. There is no political decisions anymore about what we're doing with cannabis, and as with any other legal business, and in this case one that the voters have decided we were going to remove ourselves from that early opt-out position. It is a legal business, and I think Attorney Siebert was probably the most instrumental for me in helping me to understand how cannabis is managed in Chesterfield, and that is, stop thinking of it as cannabis. Like, don't think of it as cannabis with, I don't agree with smoking marijuana, or it's bad for the kids, or it creates reefer zombies. You don't get to make those decisions. The decision was made, in this case, couldn't be more clear, by our voters. So just treat it like you would any other business, and go at your task in that manner. Like, it is a legal business, and the voters have indicated that they want it. So as you begin your deliberations, again, I just want to apologize to you, because it's not an enviable position to be in. It's not the preferred way of, that ship kind of sailed, And we are in a position now where we're under, I think, some pressure to work diligently and expediently, because I am convinced that if the individuals who spent considerable sums of money to get it on the ballot and have a successful ballot proposal, they are really tired of what they perceive to be a bureaucratic and stonewalling and blocking, and they're just very frustrated. And so I know for some of them, the financial decision is like, I'm not going to wait for Chesterfield to continue to, just say no. We're going to go to court. And then it becomes like, with each step, it becomes less able for us to have, we're bargaining now from a weakened position in a lot of ways. But I'm confident, having served with a number of you, that you're very familiar with just this type of task, and I wouldn't put any emphasis on cannabis being, it is another product, another business, and you're used to that. So thanks.
Trustee Domingue?
The information received was well received. I've read the partial rough draft that Attorney Siebert had written with some of the rules and regulations. It'll all be forwarded over to planning, and it'll be up to the members of the planning commission to take it from there.
Trustee Foster?
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I would agree with most of the comments already made. The voters have approved it. We need to come up with the best ordinance that we can, considering what the voters approved. And I am not asking this question to delay, halt, to in any way interfere with the process, but just a little bit of, could we get an explanation of what it is that was approved, of what was voted and affirmatively, what it is that we need to be looking at? Because and then bringing up the number, we're talking about the number, it said in the language, the number of, voters form an ordinance, I believe it was to establish the number of facilities. And so, but then I also realized the document that was handed out with it referred to unlimited. So is there an opinion on what it is that we eventually need to be voting on? Can it include a number, or does it have to be unlimited?
We talked about this only in the most general terms. When I talked to Supervisor Kirsten before the meeting, I suggested that we not get into a legal debate about what we're necessarily required to do, how good our legal position is, how good or bad the industry's position is. I think we should take this from the standpoint that the voters have decided that cannabis is now going to be legal in Chesterfield Township, that all of the facilities that are listed in the proposed ordinance that they submitted should be addressed by the Planning Commission and the Township Board when you ultimately get it from the Commission, and that so-called draft ordinance was in an unlimited number. Are there legal arguments that could be made? There are a number of legal arguments that could be made. I don't think any of them are productive tonight. I think we go to the Planning Commission and we talk about all of the facilities. We listen to our planning consultants and our in-house planner, talk about what's the best location for each of the types of facilities. They're not all the same. Some are more similar than others, but some have different characteristics that may go in different zones. They may all go in one zone. That's up to the commission. But I don't think it's productive tonight. And I know I'm deliberately dodging this question because I have discussed some of these issues with the clerk in the past when it was on the ballot as to what exactly that proposal meant and whether or not it meant anything at all. But let's keep that issue for another day. Let's first have the Planning Commission look at it. And when it comes back to the Township Board, if certain board members would like a detailed written opinion on what maybe your options are, I can do that and we can discuss it in closed session.
So as a follow-up, it's obviously not an easy, it wasn't easy to describe, to give an answer just based on that. And that's okay. That's okay. I don't need an answer tonight. But, so the direction really, what I'm hearing you say is just take the direction of what's most practical
Yeah.
for the township, given that the fact that we know the voters, more than half of the voters want.
For purposes of
this.
tonight, I'm doing a complete dodge of the legal question.
That's fair.
I'm simply indicating that the planning commission should get this. They should look at a zoning ordinance that looks at all of the marijuana facilities that are allowed under the act, and they should look at them in an unlimited number, which quite interestingly is exactly the zoning ordinance amendment that Giffels and I had, and Jonathan had put together pre-ballot. We drafted it as all the establishments and all unlimited. So we have kind of a canned outline to start with. And so I would probably, when we go to the planning commission, and I'll defer to Jill and Stephanie on this and Jonathan, but it wouldn't be a bad template to start with. We can take it from there.
In my opinion, starting with a number doesn't help. We need to look at the bigger
Yeah,
picture.
yes, it
All right,
does.
thank you.
Treasurer Elliott?
My questions were similar to Trustee Vosberg's about the processes and procedures. Could you also just touch on, there will be, what the process is from here? It goes to, yeah, I think it'd be good for everyone here.
Yeah, the process, that's very straightforward. There are two ordinances that have to be adopted ultimately by the township board. One is a zoning ordinance amendment, which addresses the marijuana facilities in the township. The other is a regulatory ordinance, which addresses the licensing process. You'll recall back earlier this year, with the assistance of your planning consultant, prepared a regulatory ordinance which set out a very detailed licensing process. We also put together a zoning ordinance. The mechanism for approval of each is somewhat different. The regulatory ordinance is reviewed only by the township board, and a public hearing will not be required. It'll obviously be discussed and approved at a public meeting, but there's no public hearing required unless you want to hold one. The zoning ordinance will require, I would assume, one or more meetings by the planning commission on an informal basis, kind of a roundtable like we're having here tonight, but with the commission, to talk about the issues, and then in consultation with your planners and your in-house planning consultant to submit a draft, and the planning commission will work with that draft and get it in a state that you think is ready for prime time. And at that point, you'll hold a statutorily required public hearing. That public hearing has to be held. There's notices that will go out, and at the end of that public hearing, unless the planning commission continues it to another date, the planning commission will close their public hearing and deliberate, and whether it's at that or a subsequent meeting, they will make a recommendation to the township board for approval. And then at a date subsequent to that, the township board will consider the zoning ordinance amendment. They can adopt it in whole or in part. They can make suggested revisions. They could send it back to the planning commission if they wanted. I think probably any changes would be made at the board level. They can do that without sending it back. And then you get into a timing of the adoption of both ordinances. Let's assume planning commission holds their public hearing. They've got an amendment that they're happy with. They send it to the board. The board's generally good with it. The board would then adopt the zoning ordinance amendment. You publish a notice of adoption within 15 days. It becomes effective 7 days thereafter. We would simultaneously approve the regulatory ordinance so that they would both go into effect at the same time, so that when the clerk starts receiving applications, we've got the regulatory ordinance which lays out the application process, and so the applicant knows where the hell they can go. And so it seems maybe more complicated than it is, but at the end of the day, this is a garden variety zoning ordinance amendment with a legal use, and it's a matter of how to regulate them and where to put them.
Any further? Clerk Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. A couple of things that I just wanted to bring up as far as my, particularly relevant to my part of this process, but also just my experience on the Cannabis Committee. I think it's very, very important that we look at other communities that have implemented similar ordinances and see what they've done right and what they've done wrong. I spent a lot of time talking with colleagues, especially when I was at the municipal roundtable discussion in Lansing with the Cannabis Regulatory Agency. It was named something different back then, it was a couple of years ago. But I was sitting with administrators and leaders from Grand Rapids, Detroit, Traverse City, Lansing, Ann Arbor, a couple of other very large communities that were all evaluating this issue. The legal counsel for the Michigan Townships Association, representing over 900 townships, was also in attendance and so forth. And what I learned there is that a lot of these very large communities that you would assume would have it right actually really screwed this up. And they admitted it. They were very forthcoming with the errors that they made in their processes. One of the errors that they all would acknowledge is that any type of subjective criteria, any type of scoring system, any type of point system, any type of system that's anything but purely objective, if it's subjective in any way, they were opened up to litigation. They found it was just problematic from start to finish. So that's one of the things that we want to do, is we want to take a look at the communities that got this right. And as Trustee Joseph pointed out, Giffels Webster's had a lot of experience with probably the whole gamut from A to Z, the ones who did it horribly wrong and the ones who've done it very much right. And I think what we need to really do is concentrate on spending some time investing conversations with those administrators in those communities and those legislators in those communities to find out what they felt went right, and if they could do it over again, what would they do differently and what they've learned. So I found that to be a very beneficial exercise. The other thing is with these ordinances, I can't stress enough specifics. They've got to be specific, down to the smallest detail that we can get it, so that there is no question whatsoever what the township ordinance means. There's very little room for interpretation there. Even as the point of if, for example, an ordinance wants to state that there has to be a certain amount of distance between cannabis facilities, that we can't just say there's going to be 1,000 feet between cannabis facilities. We want to say there's going to be 1,000 feet literally from the front door of the establishment to the front door of the other, or from one lot line to another, or from the southwest corner of the building to the southwest corner of the other building. It's that kind of specifics, because otherwise you get into a situation, as I've learned from my colleagues that have gone this path before us, is that you get into areas of interpretation, you get thrown into court, you have a lot of other issues. So as specific and detailed as we can make our ordinances, the better, with also specific instructions. If a particular department is to be charged with reviewing a specific part of the application, then we need to say that. If it's going to be managed in a certain way, we need to say that, so that everyone is aware of what their responsibilities are, and those who are applying, all of our applicants, will know exactly who is responsible for that portion of their application. That's more of a practical implementation issue, but the things that we can put in the ordinance that call those things out, the better. Not so much that it strangleholds us from a process standpoint, but we really do need to give some kind of a direction there as far as how we want this process to work. I've also been asked and tasked with providing a timeline or a calendar, if you will, not only for all of us who are policymakers, but also for those who are potential applicants, to give them a sense of where we are going to be in this process, how long this process is going to take. And Attorney Siebert kind of alluded to some of those things. I will be crafting that along with Attorney Siebert, Supervisor Kirsten's office. I wanted to wait until after the township calendar was approved last night at our board meeting in order to put forth some actual dates, but we will have at least a rough timeline of how we expect this to play out, so that, as Trustee Joseph said, no one feels as if, whether that's a potential applicant or the people who voted for this, or those who advocate for it, no one thinks that we are intentionally kind of dragging our feet on this or in any way preventing this process from being implemented. So I will be presenting that here in the coming days as soon as I'm able to have those conversations and put something together that makes sense. In addition to that, I have already begun working on and having meetings with a vendor who is very experienced in creating an automated application process to make sure that whatever ordinances these bodies determine, that those provisions of those ordinances are, there's an application process that is objective, that has, that is auditable, that is transparent, and that it is equal across the board for all applicants. So we want an expeditious process, but we want a process that is thorough, and we want a process that protects all of those involved. So I have already begun negotiations, or I should say negotiations, but consultations with a vendor who's very experienced in that matter, and we'll be bringing that forward as well for consideration to the board, just so that they're aware of the actual practical implementation of how we may do this. And lastly, I talked to Trustee Joseph about this earlier. Everyone has kind of touched on how important or impactful it was when you actually see these facilities, whether that is a provisioning center or whether that is a growing facility or that is a processor and so forth. In the coming month or two, I will actually be organizing a couple of opportunities for board or commission members. Obviously, we cannot have a quorum, but in small groups to actually have the opportunity to tour several different types of facilities within a relatively close geographic range of where we are at, to actually give the opportunity. We'll have those things set up in an organized fashion so that we can hopefully get as much in as possible in the short period of time. And I'd just like to extend that invitation to any of the commissioners or board members here, that I will be setting those up, and please contact me if you'd be interested in participating. Thank you.
And my comments are basically just going to restate everything that's been said here by the board members. Number one, this information meeting tonight is designed to bring our boards and other leaders up to speed on what we have experienced over the last 3 years. My goal is to make a smooth process for the township to manage, and a clear process, methodical, within legal direction, with legal guidance, with our planners and our legal counsel. Let's do it once, and let's do it correctly. Let's avoid the legal challenges and the other pitfalls that other communities that we're all aware of have been faced with. This is a challenge. There's no doubt about it. It's a challenge, whether it be personal, professional, or otherwise. It's new to our community, but the residents spoke. That message was delivered to me, at least in my perspective, loud and clear. We acknowledge what was said, and we're now charged with developing this industry in this township and entry into this township, again, with a clear path and a clear understanding within zones and regulations as that will be decided. I have full faith and confidence in Mr. Siebert. In dealing with this with the Cannabis Board over the years, I believe he's now could be deemed an expert, and I'm very impressed with Giffels Webster and what they have done in other communities, and the expectation is that they will be our resources and the board's resources planning at whatever need. Again, this is going to be a challenge. We're not going to make everybody happy. There's going to be some bumps in the road. We're going to have to discuss this at length, but let's do it once, let's do it right, and again, we are doing what the residents of this township voted for. So with that being said, I will turn it over to Mr. Miller for your board and panel's comments if they choose to.
Myself had an opportunity to go to New Baltimore and talk to some of their people there, and Rick has almost all the information. He could probably give it better than me. But Jill, how long will it take to get all this information before us? We only have one meeting in December, then we don't have anything till January.
I don't think we'll have anything until January, because I know our December 6th meeting is quite full.
Right. Okay, thanks. Rick?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the chairman mentioned, that we have an opportunity to do this right. I look forward to it, and I think that we can do it right. I would ask that Mr. Joseph and Ms. Berry did visit with other industry leaders. What I have found is that when I was speaking with other attorneys that represent other townships about this issue, is They were incredibly helpful. Whatever you need, I'll meet with you. Let's do this. Let's have lunch. Let's do whatever. Whatever it takes to make it right for Chesterfield Township. I was very impressed. And they, as Ms. Berry mentioned, have made mistakes. And they, along the way, have said, you have the opportunity to learn from our mistakes. One being, and I don't want to get into the weeds and specifics too much, but the one city that I did visit, they have a real parking issue. And it was stressed to me that we have to make sure that in the zoning area that we have this in, we choose to make sure that that zoning has to change, maybe create a new zoning ordinance, or whatever it takes to make sure that there's enough parking in the area to handle the amount of traffic that's going to happen. With that, I would like to have the names of those individuals that you spoke with as well, the business owners or what have you, because that's something else that every one of them told me, is reach out to these manufacturers, these distributors, all of these people who are actually experts in this industry, and see what they have to say and listen to them, rather than being on one side of the fence and they're on the other side of the fence. Have them become team members with Chesterfield Township. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. LaBelle, I just wanted to say, like, there are a number of them in the audience today, and I guarantee you, they'll find a way to get to you. They're going to want to talk to you, and they welcome that. And Clerk Berry and I, we'll just kind of connect after the meeting, and I'll shoot you an email with names and numbers, and go from there. Sure.
Mr. Burkhart, do you have any questions, comments?
No questions.
Mr. Klodowski?
Yes, with regard to those business licenses, the transfer of those licenses, is that state regulated, or is that something that we have to put into our regulatory ordinances?
We already have provisions in the regulatory, but you won't see that. You're going to be involved in the zoning ordinance, which will be the land use regulations, the site planning, the distance between buildings, the signage, things of that nature. We've already gone ahead and drafted for the board, and it's going to, I'm sure, be modified, a regulatory ordinance which deals with those sorts of things. So, but you will not see that.
Okay, thank you. Another question is the 1,000-foot buffer. Can we increase that, or is that set?
No, you can decrease it, but you can't increase it.
You can increase it?
No.
Okay,
Because it's going to be in conflict with the state statute.
okay, very good, thank you.
Yeah, you can always reduce it by ordinance, but you can't be in contravention of the state law.
Okay, thank you.
And these are the types of things that we'll discuss when we get to the planning commission meeting, and we have I'm assuming our first or second roundtable before we start putting it on paper.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. One other question, can we put a limit on the number of establishments, or no?
That's the issue that I had dodged earlier. Okay. For now, we're just gonna deal with where the establishments go, and we're not gonna deal with that.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Jaworski?
No, I agree too. For Chesterfield Township, this could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing. I hear that the voters have spoken, and we have a lot of homework to do. The only thing I want to stress is, I know there's a lot of investors that are eager to come here to Chesterfield, but this was voted upon November 8th, and I do not want to rush this in any way, shape, or manner. 58% of the folks voted yes, 42% voted no. Those 42% still have to live within the community, and we need to really hear them out as well. So I just don't want to rush this at all.
Thanks. Mr. Leonard?
Yes, very good presentation. A lot of information came out. We've kind of, as a planning commission, we knew this was something that we might have to deal with someday. So one question I have is the presentation, is that something we have access to?
We'll make sure to publish that on the township website by tomorrow.
Okay. The other thing is I noticed in the surrounding communities, some of them you can see right out in the open, like off of 94 in Mount Clemens. You can see that there's some facilities there. Still they're in kind of an industrial setting. New Baltimore, I believe, has a few facilities that are in an industrial setting, and I think that would be a good thing for us. I don't think I'd want to see, you know, a storefront that's been closed down for a while, all of a sudden be a candidate for a retail store. I don't know if that's something we can regulate or have an input on, but I think having it, again, this goes to not making mistakes that other communities may have made. In a way, I guess, for us and all these other communities dealing with it ahead of us, it's kind of good that we came late to the party, if you will, because it gives us an opportunity to learn the good and the bad and maybe which way to go. So looking forward to trying to do the right thing with this, and I'm sure we will. Thank you.
Mr. Carr?
No, I don't have I mean, I have a lot of questions, but I think they're more at the working level, like Mr. Siebert says. So I don't want to, you know, really no questions. I thought it was a really good presentation. I don't know very much about this. That's why I don't like asking questions that I don't have answers to already, right, kind of thing. So, but some of the questions I will ask when we get to it is just, you know, we talk about what other communities have already done. I'd be curious to know how many of them regret going down this path, if there was any. And if they were, you know, I mean, a lot of times, you know, because we got to be really careful because there's no going back. You can only go through it once, that door once, and once you open it up, you're kind of stuck with what you go with. So that's why I just want to, you know, that'd be some of my questions I'd be asking when I go around other communities is just, you know, do any of them regret it? You know, obviously now they're sharing with you what they would do better, but I'd be curious to know how many, you know, kind of maybe regret going through that door. But outside that, I mean, I'm always up for a challenge, so I think it'd be pretty great opportunity. So, but it was a great presentation because I know zero. So thank you.
Mr. Renault?
Thank you. Actually, just a couple things. First question is actually for Giffels Webster here. Would you be able to provide us with a list of the, as Clerk Barry had alluded to earlier, the ones that did it right that we could do our own research on? Recommendations for that?
I think, yeah, we'll bring some of that information, I think, with us to the January meeting. And I think in consultation with Clerk Barry and Trustee Joseph, just to find out from you where you've been, the places that you saw that you thought were done right, and places that you thought, you know, this is a little sketchy or whatever. We can compare those things too. And also looking at, I think, ordinances that were amended over the past year by communities who had adopted them, you know, previously, to see what has changed. So it's trying to keep up with things because, you know, new communities are doing this every day. They're not wildly different, I would say, the ordinances. But it really kind of goes back to what I said at the beginning, that we want to think about what we're trying to accomplish here, and then what kinds of things we might be concerned about. And so we can write that into ordinance language. And I think that gets right to Clerk Barry's comment about having clear and concise language. When we know what we're trying to accomplish, then we can write language that accomplishes that. So I think that's our charge, is to be clear on what we want and what we don't want.
Jill, if you don't mind, can you kind of describe where you've been involved in this same process real quick, just so everybody knows?
So we've got a couple of different experiences. One of the communities that we've worked with went through the whole process of adopting language, but then they had a change at their city council, and that city council decided not to finish the process, bring it all the way home to the finish line. They had gotten to the point where they had set application to be collected, and they did not do that. So that's probably not one that we want. We can look at the zoning language. I think the zoning language was good. It was maybe more of a political issue, which this happens, right? We have another community where the city council was just doing their exploratory effort, and they asked Planning Commission, we want you to write ordinance language for us so that we know what it would look like if we decided to pursue and allow this to happen. Planning Commission didn't want to do it, and they said so, and the city council was like, no, we really want you to do this. We're asking you to do it. So they did. They did write that language, and they are in the process of adopting that shortly. After quite some time of study, worried about ballot initiatives there, that did not happen. A couple other communities where we have been working, and they have businesses coming in, we're reviewing site plans, growers, retailers. So that's kind of, it doesn't really seem to be a huge issue there in terms of the number that we've seen. And then maybe a couple other communities where we did not write the language, but we helped review some of the applications as they were coming in. And so a lot of lessons we learned from that of things not to do. So kind of all over the spectrum.
Thank you, Jill. Clerk Barry, you wanted to follow up also?
Thank you. Just to address a couple of the questions that the planning commissioners maybe have mentioned, I think, and even the board, it's not so much a matter of, I don't believe, numbers as it is a matter of where they're at and how the parameters that we put in place can make a very big difference. Certain things like perhaps, making a provision that it only be in a standalone building. That means it's not in any strip malls. It's not any, you head off a lot of issues by doing that. And I'm sure Giffels Webster will advise in your planning commission meeting about that. But things like that. But I can tell you that our neighbor to the south, immediate south, Harrison Township, only allows for one type of marijuana facility. They have 27 licenses there. I have no idea where their 27 establishments are in Harrison Township, but they have issued 27 licenses. So, and I think to their credit, the reason why we don't go through Harrison Township and say, oh, geez, this small township and where are the 27 marijuana establishments is because they were very savvy in terms of where they put them and how they set forth their parameters. So that may be a community as well. With 27 licenses. I think I don't say they hide them well, but I think they planned them very well, it would seem to me. Also, being concerned with, again, kind of the ones who did it right and kind of having regrets and so on and so forth. I will tell you in my conversations with the various communities who have implemented this policy is that their regrets basically revolve around, as Jill alluded to, which resulted in ordinance amendments, are things that sounded great on paper, but when they got to the practical implementation stage, they found that it just wasn't practical, or it was problematic. And so they regretted maybe waiting too long to make those changes, or not really thinking through some of those things, or not testing them, or maybe not doing their homework enough, that they either caved to some political pressure on certain points, or they just weren't quite thinking of it maybe in the right context, and they would regret some of those decisions that they made that then forced them into ordinance amendments and other types of things. So when I hear anything about regrets, that's the one thing that I'm hearing, but I think that we can mitigate a lot of that by getting things done properly now.
Mr. Miller, I'll turn it back over to you to finish your.
27 in Harrison Township. That's 37 already. How many can you have without this being overpopulated and all these businesses are very slow?
Yeah, Mr. Miller, I think when Clerk Barry talked about 27 licenses, and I heard Mr. Leonard, he was right in terms of the manufacturing industrial complex. The Harrison Township licenses are provisioning centers and grows. So you're not talking about, we don't have retail there. And so the driving force in Chesterfield was a desire to have retail. So I think as you hear more information, Mr. LaBelle, you will get like all your questions answered in terms of like what the different licenses are. You will see that each license has a different need. So if I have no customers at the, my particular license, if I'm a provisioning center, I'm not worried about traffic or, who can see me. And so you see the business needs are dramatically different. So when you drive down 94 and you get that smell and you've just driven through, you are in the middle of a very big grow there's a very large grow and a very big provisioning center where they take the grown product and convert it into the things that Clerk Barry was talking about, edibles and other consumable products. There's no foot traffic and there's no retail customer there. Those are more appropriate for a commercial because they're committing a commercial operation where their product then goes out into the retail establishment. So when you say how many can there be, we've had this discussion, you will have it. You're wondering how much marijuana, users are good, but what you're talking about are businesses that are companion businesses that are necessary to get it to the consumer. So you wouldn't expect, I wouldn't expect, Chesterfield has 27 retail establishments because it's the same reason we don't have 27 McDonald's. There's just not that many hamburger enthusiasts to support that business. So they know, and the different licenses, and when you're talking about different communities, is you're talking about different operations.
Thank you. Any other questions from the Planning Commission? Mark?
So I just had one other one, and this is for our commissioners, or they were on the Cannabis Commission, Clerk Barry and Trustee Joseph. You had mentioned you talked to a number of people that were very forthcoming in being able to provide information, and you'd mentioned that they may be approaching us, which is great, but would we have access to the individuals that you'd spoken to already so that we might get better educated as well?
Yeah, I'll be happy to reach out to you. If any Planning Commission member, I do better with my phone, like text. So if you want to give me your cell, I'm much easier on that, and I will contact a number of individuals. I'd also like you, and I'll send it to you if you haven't read it. I did a editorial or letter to the editor to the Macomb Daily, and I referenced several individuals that I had met with in my sort of education process. And there were really some phenomenal people who worked in other states, not just in Michigan, but they came to us from, say, Colorado. One individual in particular was named the most influential woman in cannabis, and her background wasn't cannabis. It was a completely different business, but business is business, and she was on a number of committees in the state of Colorado, including something that was interesting to me was the health department and the impact of cannabis, retail or legal cannabis, the effect on children's health. And listening to her talk, you could see, like, if you separated I'm for it or I'm against it, and you just looked at, no opinion, what's the impact of cannabis on mental health, crime, children, drug addiction rates, and so forth, you can see more information, and it starts to help shape your opinion on where it goes and who wants to see it. To the 42% that voted no, perhaps are voting no because they just think it's a dangerous product. But when you look at it from the eyes of some of these people that have been in the industry for a long time, you get a deeper appreciation for what these are. So I'd be happy to send you all the information that you'd like. It is tremendous amount of, Brian, I've worked with you, and I know how thorough you are. You don't like to make decisions until you have all the data, and I can tell this is catching you fresh. But it's out there, and it's been very, very, very closely studied, even though it's so new. And there's a lot of data that I think you're going to enjoy. But I'd be happy to forward to you any information you'd like.
Dave, if you could just send it, email it to me, I will get it to the rest of them, so you don't have.
Sure.
Okay.
Also, Mr. Supervisor, if I can just address this question that was addressed to me specifically. Also, all of the minutes of the Cannabis Committee meetings and all of the agendas and agenda packets that we have had for 2 years are available online. So you can literally read through all the minutes. You'll see many names listed in there of people who've come in front of the committee, and there is also in some of the packets some of the supplemental materials as well. So that is all available to you online. If you have any trouble reaching that, just let me know.
No, precisely what I was looking for. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Mr. Miller, you good with your board? Okay, I'm going to bring back over here Trustee Vosberg, second round.
Yeah,
third
thank
round.
you. It's good we're all asking for information. I would prefer that can we have that, whatever information is shared with everybody, from the planning commission to the board of trustees, that we all receive the same information? I know Trustee Joseph was talking about, well, I'll send you stuff, but it would be helpful, I think, if we all saw it. We're not gonna have time.
point.
We won't be able to all read everything, but the things that are of interest to us, we will be able to, and we can all access, well, have the same information.
It's an excellent point. Jonathan and planning will be more than happy to accommodate that paperwork and make sure that all boards and all information is disseminated throughout. Thanks for volunteering, Jonathan. You were voluntold. Trustee Domingue, anything further? Clerk Treasurer Elliott, please.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I, in the last few weeks since this vote had passed, have gone on tours by many of the folks that are here in the audience. It was very informative, very helpful. They talked about things like the lighting around the building, within the building, the traffic flow, how they're dealing with the smell, and their inventory. They were very open and very forthcoming in everything. Those were retail establishments. Some of the things that, you know, they talked about is how they're handling in-person traffic, how they're handling deliveries to their homes, because you've probably seen that is happening. There's pull-up services, and so I absolutely encourage you to go ahead and do that. It was very helpful, you know, to have those experiences hands-on and to be able to see it with my own two eyes. The other thing is what I'll be doing, my next step is, as a treasurer, we talk about how this has affected those communities in treasurers' conferences. So I'll be meeting with several of the treasurers as well about those experiences, and I'll forward that information if there's any of them that, you know, have any information. I'll forward it to everybody here that's here today as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from any board members on either panel?
Yeah.
Trustee Joseph?
Sorry, I was just checked by a individual who realized I referenced provisioning in Harrison. Those are grows. So provisioning is the retail side. The businesses in Harrison are grows. In terms of comments regarding Trustee Elliott's, how it affects the Treasury. Last year, every retail license holder, the city that or municipality that it was housed in, received $56,000. So the Treasury can expect to see increased revenue. There is no downward on anything in the Treasury, so I'm not sure what information needs to be gleaned from the Treasurer's Roundtable, but I can tell you it goes up. And then lastly, I do much better with text and so I will provide my phone number to you, and I will also provide the information in the kind of more traditional old-fashioned way, and we can distribute it. But if people are interested in knowing immediately who to contact, I'll be happy to text that to you, and you can call them and be in their you know, communication the next day. You know, with any bureaucracy, I'll email it to somebody who's retired, who takes the master list, and then we can go to I can text it to you tonight, and you can get on it tomorrow if you like, or you can wait for the shared email list that'll work its way through, and then somebody will put a binder, and then somebody else will check the binder, and so forth. So I'm happy to do both. But for those of you who are interested in getting on this right away, I'll text it to you immediately. And no disrespect, Trustee Vosberg, but I've been begging for 3 years to take a look at this information and go out and see these things. So I'm happy to do the shared list and so forth, but I'm frustrated because this information has been available to all of us for a long time, including public meetings at the Cannabis Committee. And part of the reason we're here is because we didn't have enough information on our board. So I'll end my editorial there, but this idea of, you know, can we share the information? Sure, I'll share it, but let's be real, and let's get like our personal ownership for our own education the way, you know, others are saying, get me that information. So, thank you.
Trustee Vosberg?
Thank you. there's much information that's already been available, and we can read that. It's already been said. We can go to the website and read that. What I'm referring to is, I don't think it's helpful if there's private conversations going on that would be of benefit to the rest of us. If it's just a matter of, hey, do you have the phone number for Mr. So-and-so, that's not what I'm referring to. But I'm referring to if information is being shared, like I talked to so-and-so and they said such and such, that's something I think we would all benefit from hearing. Thank you.
And Clerk Berry.
Thank you. Just one other item that I forgot to mention, and I'm sorry I'm remiss in that, but this is something that may help the Planning Commission commissioners, is that you may hear a term called vertically integrated. Vertically integrated operations are a bit of a challenge, and the reason they're a challenge is because they actually have multiple things happening in one location. So you have one location that grows and sells. So you're looking at a manufacturing operation as well as a retail operation taking place in the same place at the same time. So that's one of the areas that I am hoping that the Planning Commission will give some, also some detailed specifics on in the proposed ordinances. How are we going to treat vertically integrated operations? Thank you.
Thank you, Clerk Berry. That being all the comments said, we will move on to item 8, addendums. There are no addendums noted. Item 9, public comments. We will invite the public to come up to the podium. You can make public comments. They're really, you can pose the question. I don't know if we're going to have all the answers for you tonight. And again, this is the kickoff of this journey. So I would invite the public to come to the podium. Again, we may not be able to answer the questions directly and immediately. You have 5 minutes to speak, and if you would, state your name for the record.
Sorry. Please make sure to, if you can press the button right on, and the red light will come on the microphone. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I hate being the first person to talk because it just invites more people to come up. But I believe that this is a hard task before the board. The poorly worded summary on the ballot with the word unlimited, let this be in theory, all property zoned for cannabis can and will sell cannabis. And I think the attorney had just concerns, and I agree with his focus should be on zoning. So it's because you can't really enumerate unlimited. You can't really come to a number of unlimited. It's imperative that we focus on being fair and both protecting the rights of the current residents and businesses and give opportunities the voters had requested. I strongly encourage the township to consider a fair but limited number of zones and focus on properties with the most need of investment. Zones in M1 and M2 could use would benefit from the the cannabis investments. This will allow cannabis industry to, as Clerk Berry said, have ample opportunity for vertical integration. What's a little bit misleading about when Barry mentioned that Harrison Township has 27 sites and they're so discreet and secretive, but a lot of those sites have multiple licenses. So there's not going to be like 27 different buildings for 27 licenses. I think it's important to keep the footprint limited and stick to zones M1 and M2. It'll benefit the community as well as the cannabis industry. Also be noted that as mentioned in the state referendum that these lots must be proper distances from school, parks, churches, and rehab clinics. I just reinstate this because the attorney did point out that you have to stick within state guidance. It's 1,000 feet, and it's 1,000 feet permitted corner of lot to corner of lot, but you can change it to 1,000 feet door to door or 500 feet door to door. You could make it less, but you can't make it more. And the state statute, I believe, is 1,000 feet corner of lot to corner of lot. I'm pretty sure I'll have more questions as this goes along, and I appreciate that. And if anybody on the board has any questions, they can contact me at any time. Thank you for your time.
Any further comments from the public?
John Speaka, 53978 Connor Drive. I want to thank the board and the planning commission and the people in the audience for the opportunity to speak. Just to reiterate, the voters have spoken in Chesterfield, and cannabis is here to stay. So I think it's a good thing for the community. It's way overdue, and it's going to bring in a lot of needed revenue. God knows we need that. So, but I wanna get it right the first time. I don't want anything rushed. And to me, the most important thing that was said is, to take our time and to get it right the first time. Unfortunately, back in May or June, Trustee Joseph and Clerk Barry brought forth, which I thought was, it was a good proposed ordinance that I think was going to be a good fit for the township, but unfortunately, I had 4 board members that voted no. So, and, Treasurer Elliott voted no. Trustee Vosberg, Mr. Demink voted no, and unfortunately, our supervisor, Mr. Kirsten, voted no. So we're here tonight. But again, as long as we get it right, that's the important thing. I think it's going to be a good thing for the community moving forward, and I think it's going to work out. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public?
Is that good? Good evening. My name is Chris Aiello. I'm a Chesterfield resident. I live on Compass Point. I've lived on Compass Point since 1996. So hello, neighbors. I'm in the business. There are a number of groups that have been discussing, guiding, sharing information with the township for 2 years. So I'm not an outsider. I have 3 kids. Chris, stand up. That's my son, Chris. He runs 2 stores, one in Ferndale and one opening tomorrow in Lincoln Park. And we have 3 other locations throughout the state. So the business is here in your backyard. You probably just didn't know it, that I am your neighbor and I am in the business, and it's here. And so I have a lot of knowledge to share with you. Since 2015, I'm an attorney at heart, an attorney on foot, and so I've traveled from Traverse City to Luna Pier, engaging in governmental affairs, enacting ordinances with local communities. I've done it all, so I have a pretty strong background on anything you may be able to know. If you have questions, I'll be attending the Planning Commission. I'm like a legal dictionary at this point. My practice is converted to cannabis regulations, rules, and representation throughout the entire state of Michigan. So I look forward to working with the Planning Commission. We've worked with the board. I think there's a consensus at this point. It needs to go forward. And I noticed some of you probably, this is the first time invitation to this issue. Please don't be discouraged or afraid. It's everywhere. It's through the entire state. The municipalities that are generating the most income for their residents, including me, you, and everyone that sits in this room, are the ones that got in front of this. Every store last year received, every retail store in the state of Michigan that was opened received $56,000 to the local coffers of the local community that allowed them to open a door. $56,000. Imagine if 7-Eleven gave $56,000 per location to Chesterfield Township. Maybe our real estate taxes would be a little bit cheaper to afford for what we do. So it's here, and that's not the only issue, but the demand is here. The people voted. And the industry, there's a lot of great people in the industry. Please, you're going to get to meet a lot of us. There's like a number of groups that have participated for the last 2 years, and you'll get to probably meet each and every one of them. All good people. If you read in the newspaper, the Macomb Daily, what Puff did, or Pierre did in New Baltimore, gave away like 1,000 turkeys. That's not uncommon. It happens everywhere. There's an organization, Puff, in Utica that gave away like 2,000 turkeys. 2,000. Just gave them out. And that's the philanthropy that you will see. You'll see groups coming here saying, okay, if the library needs help here, I'm telling you right now, you will see the philanthropy come from this industry. It will be here. You will love the stores. If you get a chance and you haven't visited, we'll set up a tour, we'll rent a bus, and we'll bring you out there store to store. We're better than jewelry stores, and the security is better than jewelry stores. And the security guards and the cameras are foolproof. Nothing can go on there, nothing will go on there, and nothing has gone on there. And so each and every group that wants to participate will probably roll out. I'll maybe give my phone number to Mr. LaBelle and then disseminate it, and I'll be at the Planning Commission meetings, but outside of that, I know that the industry will host if it's allowed and Mr. Siebert thinks it's all good. We're more than willing to have coffee with you at Tim Hortons or wherever on 23 Mile. I'll meet you at Panera, and we'll have a coffee, and you probably have lots of questions. I'm a dictionary, so if I can answer that and help, I will. So neighbors, it was nice seeing you. We're here, but we're here with open hands, and we want to work with the community and make Chesterfield better. All my kids have been born and raised here, and I love Brandenburg Park. It's my favorite place. So nice to meet everybody.
Thank you, sir. Any further comments from the public?
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeffrey Curtis. I live on Private Shore Drive, 45668. I've been a resident in Chesterfield for 37 years. A business owner here for 22 years, and I think you guys are doing a great job. I think the board and the Planning Commission as well, you're heading in the right direction here. You're getting homework from other people that made mistakes. You're going to do the right thing, and you take a little bit of time to doing it. It's more than fair, but I think you'll get it right, and you'll save a lot of time for everybody. The other thing is, I think the zoning should be in the M1, M2 district, industrial. I don't know if you want to go any further than that, but that's my suggestion on my end, as being a business owner here for a long time, is try to keep it contained in M1 and M2. I think would be a good approach to start doing that way anyway. It's just a suggestion for the Planning Commission and the board. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Any further comments from the board? Or from the public, I'm sorry.
If I roll up behind that, none of you are ever going to see. I think I can speak loudly enough probably for all of you. I got a big mouth.
We just need the recording to pick it up, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Clint Wellington, and potential investor, and appreciate all the work that you guys have done, especially with the clerk and Mr. Joseph. You guys are off to a great start, I think. A couple things I heard, I just wanted to make some clarification on, and then I have a question. You know, just because this law passed doesn't mean that cannabis is just starting to come to Chesterfield. It's been here for years. It's just making it legal. That's the big difference. But, you know, from some of the comments I heard, like cannabis is coming, it's been here. It's been in all the high schools. We all know this. You know, I've been around cannabis users my whole life. Right now, I do use gummies because of pain, neuropathy. I suffer from chronic pain, and I have two alternatives, cannabis or oxycodone type drugs, related drugs. And the problems with OxyContin are very complex, highly addictive, where cannabis, a gummy, will do the trick. So that's just, you know, just a tiny piece of information for you. It's been a good thing for me, the legalization of it. I would like to know about the timeline. You referenced that you put together a timeline in your presentation, but I didn't see anything. Is there anything that we could get as from the public?
We can't release that right now, just because we don't know. We're gonna have to organize schedules. If not, right after the first of the year.
Okay, okay.
And I'm gonna tell you, there really isn't going to be a delay. Again, this process is the first kickoff, and we're moving forward. And really, it's just a matter of getting all the information that planning needs, and we'll move forward forthwith.
Okay. I think as far as a business, that having a retail store in an industrial complex doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's retail. It should be in the retail area. I don't think grow should be in retail because it smells. But retail stuff doesn't smell. I mean, I've been to Puff, been to plenty of the retail operations, and there's really no issues as far as I can see. So I just wanted to make that point as well, if it would be helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Chris Jr. As you guys know, my father and I are in the family business here of the marijuana industry. I have taken care of Ferndale for 3 years now. I've worked it from the working outside to curbside all the way up to being the general manager's assistant. There's been a lot of things going on in this industry in the sense of it's been developing and evolving every day. And I mean every day to every minute of it. And we know that regulations will change just as often, if not more often. So what we've strived in the business is to become compliant, become knowledgeable, and become friendly with the community, with our government, and with our peers. My store in Ferndale has, within even the square block radius, 5 more competitors, and that's in an actual square block radius. And when you go outside of that, the number just exponentially increases. What really sets this industry aside is that it's not necessarily competition. It's more of friendly wagers. My store's got one deal, your store might have a better deal, but at the end of the day, we all made money. And with that money, the community itself benefited. There have been multiple congruent events with the cannabis industry and with community events, such as the Pride event in Ferndale, Arts Beats and Eats, and etc. Denying any form of marijuana advancement in the community is not necessarily the best idea, in my opinion, because this is America, we are a free market, and we should be able to conduct the business as we see fit legally and by the book. That's my thoughts and opinions of it. I would love to, meet with some of you guys as well. I am a young mind in the industry. I do have a lot to offer. I have a background in IT and a focus in system administration. I have gone hand in hand with the security teams to make sure that traffic flow is maintained and that people aren't, too outlandish, and that everyone does have a really nice, safe, and comfortable experience at whatever retailer, grower, or processor you end up seeing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we call you Junior? Is that good? Junior's good? Thank you, Junior. Any further comments from the public? No further comments from the public? We'll close the public comments portion. Clerk Barry would like to be...
No, there's one more.
I'm sorry. Apologize.
My name is Anthony Trucano. I'm a real estate agent. I work a lot with the cannabis industry. It's kind of my specialty. I just wanted to give my input on the locations of the grow facilities and retailers. I am seeing very little demand for grow facilities, and so if you decide to put the retails into the M1 and M2 districts, what I think you'll see is a lot of large industrial buildings with a lot of empty space. So you'll see buildings that are 15, 20, 25,000 square feet that have a 3,000 or 4,000 square foot retail space and are empty, and the rest of it. And they may decide to put on their applications that they'll have grows included, or their site plans, but a lot of times those get scrapped. So I really do think that if you're going to allow it, I would recommend limiting the size of the building or allowing multiple uses, not just marijuana in the same building.
Thank you, sir. Again, any further comments from the public? No further comments from the public, then I'll close that portion out. Item 10 is adjournment. Mr. Miller, I'll let you adjourn your board panel first. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Trustee
Second.
Minks? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting is adjourned at 8:42.